Om Sahanavavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. The last week, couple of weeks, that what we have seen is about the way that we do the worship or the puja. There are two different aspects that we talked about it. One is internal and the other is the external. And how we can convert the whole idea of consciousness into the form of an object outside in such a way that we don't see the object, but we see the consciousness existing inside that particular object. It may be a stone, it may be a river. That's a beautiful way that our system has developed all these things. And that is what we call it as prana pratisthapana. We do that. And that gives us a great flexibility to see that wherever that we would like to do the puja, whatever object that we have, we can do the prana pratisthapana. And then offer it to it as if it is something which is like a living object in front of us, living deity, God in front of us. And this is what is the basically, whatever that spirituality, the divinity that's there within us, is the same thing which manifests outside. This is what is one puja, external puja, and the other is the internal puja, where we see that we remove whatever that is not supposed to be the divinity, or whatever that is representing the or connected with the objective world outside. We try to eliminate that. That's what is a beautiful practice of neti neti, Vedanta substance. Ultimately, we come to that level where that existence that is there, which is not governed by anything else, mere existence itself, mere sat itself, and that's what we come to. It's not like an experience, but it is something that you are existing. See, as long as that you are still experiencing, that means to say it is still like an object in front of you. Even the sat remains as an object in front of you, but sat is existence itself. So come to that level, which is supposed to be internal worship. So these two are the worships, two types of worship that we have seen in the last chapter. Here, similarly, that he brings about a concept where the two are there, out of which that he takes the second portion of it. Let me explain what are the two things that are there. Before going to the chapter, let us develop a small little introduction for that whole concept that is there. What we have seen Patanjali, as the way that I explain about Patanjali, did not, he looked at human being from a different way compared to what is Taittiriya Upanishad, where human being looked at 5 different personality levels. The same thing when you look at Mandukya Upanishad, he looked at human being as avasthatraya. That means 3 different states of experience, out of which we try to evolve the 4th state of experience called as the Turiya. These are the things that normally people speak about. But Patanjali has an interesting way. That means basically, it also has the basis from the Vedanta, in the sense that in Vedanta, we have an idea that everything is nothing but same Brahman. Only thing is that the manifested world outside is supposed to be the Gati and Brahman is the Sthiti. Patanjali also agrees with that idea that the whole creation outside, manifestation world outside, is nothing but an activity, Gati. That's what he calls it as Vritti. Vedanta calls it as Gati. But then Sthiti is the core that is there, and that's what Patanjali calls it as Swarupa. So very similar ideas that are there, whether it is in the Upanishad that you take, or Yoga Vasisthha, or Patanjali Yoga Sutras. So he makes use of this particular concept of Gati aspect of it. Now, when Patanjali said it, there are 2 types of Gati that he said. Activity, that means Gati is possible because of energy, or energy-like thing, whatever that we are inside. And that's what we call it as, not having a better word, we call it as energy, but otherwise it is called as Chetana. So actually in Sanskrit, the word Chetana is much more pleasant word compared to the idea of energy, because energy looks to be non-existence kind of a thing. That means it does not have any uh, a form of a human existence. Whereas the moment that you say Chetana, it is something which is like a life which aspect that is there. So therefore that these, let us refer to as Chetana. Chetana has two types of manifestations within. And that is what Patanjali's view, and that's where Yoga Vasishtha also comes into. And that is, one is the Chetana which is directed towards the outwardly, and that's what is called as prana. Means whatever that expression comes, that's what is pranayati. And that is because of prana. I see because of prana, ears hear because of prana. It is the prana which created all these centers, and through which that functioning takes place, and you are connected with the world outside. And these prana is connected with the external sensory organs, that is Bahyendriyas, and it is connected with the Bahyendriyas. And also this prana is connected with various activities that are there, the lungs and heart and this and that. These are all the physical aspects of it, physiological aspect, and in which that this functioning goes on. The second aspect is the chitta. That means to say the same chetana manifests in the form of prana and also in the form of chitta. And this chitta aspect is something where various activities going on, like hearing, listen, and like memorizing and recollecting, etc., etc. All those things that are there. Now, as we said, that one prana which is responsible for all the activities that are going on, but based on the different activities type it is going on, we divide it into 5 different pranas, which are called as pancha prana. Substance wise, there is no difference between one prana and the other. They are all the same. Whether it is prana, apana, vyana, udana, whatever we call it, is the same. Only thing is, because of the various types of function, we divide them for convenience. Where there is an upward to downward force is there, movement is there in a sinusoidal way, like a pendulum way. When it movement is there, this is what is called as prana. And that pendulum way of activity, when you look into yourself, it is the respiration that's going on, inhaling, exhaling, the heartbeat that's going on, inhale and systolic, diastolic, etc., etc. So this is the aspect which this kind of functioning we call it as prana. So mukhya prana is the main prana, and this functioning is what is called as prana. Similarly, there's only an outward activity, upward activity that's going on. It's called as urthva. Urthva is upwards. Therefore, it is called as udana. Similarly, there's only downward activity, which does not have a counterpart of upward activity. You take the food is digested, and the food, moment you push the food through the throat, it only goes in the downward direction. It has to go in the downward direction. There's no question of any balancing upward kind of an activity there available. So as long as the food is sent downwards, the downward activity is there. Afterwards, the whole stomach rests. So this downward activity, what we call it as apana. Apana comes from the word called adho gacchati. That means downward force. Like that, we have 5 different pranas. The prana is the same, but it manifests through various activities. We have different names. It's like the way same electricity manifests through the heater, we call it as, it becomes like a heat. When it manifests through the bulb, it manifests in the form of a light. But somewhere else, it manifests in the form of a radio, in the form of a music. So like that, it has different functions. But the common thing that is there behind it is only the electricity. The same way, common thing behind all these prana, apana, vyana, udana, samana is supposed to be mukhya prana. And their activities, based on that, all these 5 different pranas are named. And further also, that people are interested in going into subtler and subtler way of looking at it. They further divided it into what is called as upapranas. Naga, Kurma, Dhananjaya, Devadatta, all these different upapranas are there, carrying on different functions within us. But then the prana is the same. Let's not mistake it that there are different kind of prana that are there within us. It's one and the same thing, manifests in these different ways. So it, it is based on the activity. This nomenclature has come. Excuse me. The same way, I was thinking that how to explain about that. There's another activity which goes on within us, inward directed activity. That's what is chitta. It's all the chitta, one and the same thing. But then again, it has got different types of activity going on inside. Based on their activities, the chitta has been divided into 4 different categories. 5 different categories, because, and then prana, which goes through pancha jnanendriyas, whereas this 4 different antakaranas it goes into. And one is called as that which continuously thinking as activity goes on, an activity called as thinking, and that we call it as mind, manas. There is nothing like a manas as substance existing. There is nothing like manas. You can't find out that there is a place where that is something like a unit is sitting there which is called as manas. No, a thinking activity, what goes on into inwardly, it is called as manas. And who are all the things who gives the input for that thinking? It's the object world that we see, the senses, and also the memory that you have. All these things align together, and then thinking activity goes on. And this is what we call it as manas, or the mind. Roughly we call it as mind. The second activity is where anything that is there immediately, it continues to analyze. It continues to dialogue on that in the form of analysis. And this analyzing activity is what we call it as buddhi. Buddhi is not something different like another unit that is sitting there. Manas is one unit, buddhi is another unit sitting somewhere. It's nothing like that. It's only the activity which is supposed to be analyzing activity. Analyzing activity, trying to put into various categories and all that. This is what is basically, this activity is what is called as buddhi, or the intellect. And then third is the thing where you store and then bring it out, something which goes into the store, and then whatever that is there in the store brings out, and then activity goes on in the form of storing and remanifesting all that thing, going inside and bringing out and remanifesting all those things, is what is called as the chitta. Chitta is not that there is any substance there, but it is that activity where the storing and recollecting and all those things, related activities going on, and those activities are supposed to be chitta. And then somebody who identifies with all these things, and that identifying of all these activities is supposed to be what is called as the ego, the ahankara. So ahankara also, there is nothing. In fact, if you try to find out where is the seat of ahankara, where it is, there is nothing like that. It is basically the way that who owns all these activities, the kind of owning of all these activities or identifying with all these activities, is that kind of an activity is what is called as ahankara. So every time that whatever that you see, that these continuous activities are going on, one of the ways that it goes to the object outside, immediately it goes back to the I, and it converts itself into the form of I. It converts itself in the form of chitta, and again it comes in the form of manas. So this is a continuous activity that is going on within us. This is what our Shastriji always used to say, that this activity goes on so fast, and this he calls it as coning. Coning is that you cone yourself onto the object outside, and then you come back with the information, and then you cone onto the ego, ahankara, that I am seeing it, and again it cones itself into the memory, and therefore we say that it is set in memory. It is nothing but the I which is there behind, it is shifting from one to the other on these 4 antakaranas. Inner activity that is going on. Like the external activities in the form of seeing, hearing, and all those things are collecting the data, and then the mental activity, same components of the seeing, hearing, etc., they are there correspondingly. That's why when we hear, that the hearing activity that is there in the store gets resonate on that. You try to compare with that. And you hear the voice, somebody, several years later that you again hear the voice and once you recognize, oh, this is the same voice. That means to say hearing activity, it refers to goes inside and then there is a memory activity that goes on, digs deep into the memory and then finds out that voice. So therefore it compares. So this activity that goes on inside is what is called as the chitta's activity, or like the prana activity and the chitta activity. And suddenly that you happen. Prana activity is in the time. That means your respiration is in time. You're talking, you're walking, you're picking up things, they're all in time. Whereas the chitta activities are in the space. The more and more space that you create, more free it feels, that it becomes relaxed, it becomes easy. You feel that chitta becomes expansive when you are in compassion, when you are in positive mood, it all becomes connected with the expansion. When you are in negative mood, you feel that you are constricted, your anger, hatred, jealousy, or when you are in the case of depression, it becomes like you are focused into that. That means to say you have lost the expansiveness that is there within you. So therefore, chitta activity is always in the case of expansion or in the case of space, and the prana activity in the case of time. And prana activity is more of an abhyasa. Chitta activity is more of a vairagya. In fact, the way that how you can expand yourself is by giving up the narrow boundaries. When you give up, you expand. There is no other way that you expand. Expansion does not mean that you try to pull the boundaries, but you give up the boundary. That's why it is called as vairagya. Give up the boundary so that expansion takes place. It's like the way in the Kabir, Birbal's story of Akbar. Make this line short without touching it, without cleaning it. Birbal says it is very simple. And then he took a chalk and then put a line which is bigger than that. Actually, this becomes short. So the moment that you give up the smallness, you become expansive. So you don't have to do anything with that. Expansion is not something that you create. It just automatically happens. And the more and more a saintly person is a person who is more and more expansive. He encompasses everything. So the growth is in that particular expansion. That's why Vivekananda in one of his talks has said, expansion is life, contraction is death. Contraction brings about boundaries, and ultimate contraction is that you are so bounded that you don't live outside, you don't exist at all. So therefore, contraction is death, expansion is life. So expansion is what, this is what basically is in the form of space, not in the form of space, whereas the abhyasa is in the form of time. The discipline is the form of time, or in other words, that prana is belonging to the time, whereas chitta belongs to the space. So space in the chitta is what gives us what is called as avakasha, and therefore that when the avakasha is this space which is called as akasha, is also known as in Sanskrit as kham. And when there is no boundaries that you are bombarding onto, just imagine this small little area where a Brownian movement takes place within that in the form of bombardment. When that bombardment is there, there is so much of suffering because there is no freedom. And it also brings about speed. Whereas when there are no boundaries to hit on, it's all openness, that Brownian movement is free. At that point of time, it is called as, there is no suffering, and that's why it is called as su, and then boundary, and then space is called as kham. So sukham is when there is no boundary. Sukham is when you are expansive. Sukham is when you're not rigid about the boundaries that are there. The whole sky is in front of you. Whereas when the boundaries make you suffer, don't go this way, don't go that way. That's why the children do not like that bondage. They would like to have that freedom. They would have They would have liked to have that freedom. So, and every movement that you see, the child growth that you see is nothing but an expression of that freedom. Like getting up and walking is a wonderful degree of freedom. And to be able to do their own activity is like another degree of freedom. Like that, every step the child is looking at the freedom. Learning about alphabet is a degree of freedom. And earning money, wow, if money is there, there's so much of freedom. Staying in the house, no freedom. Going into the hostel gives a big freedom. That's why children would love to go to hostel, because that freedom is there. But they don't understand freedom always comes with responsibility. So therefore, that space is the content where it is the idea of chitta that is there. And ultimately, what Patanjali says is that we have to come out of prana, and we also have to come out of chitta so that we become swarupa. And all these things that we keep in the memory, and then we again and again touch about that, is what is supposed to be the vasana. We go back to that for reference every time is supposed to be vasana. And almost like vasana drags our life towards that. So that means you slowly become a slave to the object outside, which is there in your memory. If it is not there in your memory, that will never become like a habit, like never like becomes like a vasana, never becomes like a samskara. So therefore, all these things are developed in the chitta. Also, we know very clearly, it is that which is in the form of memory, where it contains. We say that calm down the mind. The idea of calming down the mind is basically to see that this thinking activity does not go on. And thinking activity depends upon input from various things. Your intellect also gives an input. In fact, how can I not think when it is something which is going on wrong? Something right, it's okay, but something wrong is going on. I have to think, I have to correct it. And this I have to do it, that means basically that you own it. And that's what is ahankara. So ahankara and chitta, all these things coordinate, the thinking activity goes on. If you do not want to touch the ahankara, do not want to touch the memory, or if you do not want to touch the analysis, that means to say intellect, if you really want mind to calm down, you cannot do it. It's not easy. Because the input is continuously coming from all the directions, all that what can happen when the input is coming, when the idea is coming that you are supposed to say something. If you don't say that, you are only suppressing that whatever thinking that's going on. When you suppress the thinking, what happens is that you become really very negative about the world outside. It takes you towards depression. Don't suppress it. Once we say that don't suppress it, then when you express, then it creates a problem to us. So therefore, we are caught up in these ideas whether we have to suppress it or express it. Some people express, some people suppress it. Many times what happens, who expresses seem to be much more easier than somebody who suppresses it. There is one tennis player by name McEnroe. He is also known as, many times he was known as the bad boy on the tennis tennis court. Because he would shout, he would make all kinds of noises, and many times he was fined. Many times he was, I think in the tennis court at the international level, maximum fines were on McEnroe. He used to play a nice game of tennis. I used to love his play. But then always that he used to have that kind of thing. Not only that, many times all the pranks that he would do on the stage, on the court, may not be very, it is like it would attract fine, but many times it would also make people to laugh. So he would very humorous that way. One day it so happened there is a Wimbledon tournament is going on. I was watching from, I think, Germany, or I was in England or something like that. I was watching on the TV. Suddenly the TV man says that, oh, there is a special guest in the Wimbledon today. Then he focused on the camera on the people's audience sitting in the tennis this thing, found that Bill Clinton was there. And then immediately called Clinton to the studio during the break time. And then Clinton said, so nice that American president and ex-president, now you don't have the work in White House, therefore you have time, you could take time easy to come here. He said, no, no, actually I'm much more busier than what I was in White House, whatever he said. But I said, tell me something about tennis. You are interested in tennis. He said, I always would love to watch tennis, particularly my most favorite player is McEnroe. And McEnroe was sitting there. And he said, your play I was always enchanted by the way that you play. Take it so easy. But then I always see that you fight with that. McEnroe replied, if I don't fight with that, I will become a victim of hypertension. So wherever, whatever anger is there, I would just throw it up. I would become free. Yeah, it would give some fine, $1,000, $2,000, something like that. I would pay that down, but I don't want to necessarily pent up my anger. I don't want to hold it. I don't want to create anger like my vasana. I would just throw it up freely. You just scavenge it. You just expel it out. And how beautiful it was. And therefore, actually, he was still the end. He was a very, very healthy player. He never lost his health. Because of the age, he had to retire, but otherwise, he was a very healthy player. He was one of the top players. So that means there was no question of vasana suppression that were there. So we try to keep the things in the memory, and then every time that comes and charges on whatever the activity that we are doing, that becomes like vasana, and that becomes like samskara. So this is what is the mechanism that's there inside, whatever that is going on. And in this, you do not see what is where, what is happening where. It's all called as chitta. Like the way all that activity is called as prana, all this activity is called as chitta. But there is one thing difference between the prana and chitta is, prana activity, at least you can see the location where the activity is going on. Like for example, your nerve activity is going on. That means to say jnana is active. Similarly, respiration is going on. That means to say prana is going on. All right. Your defecation is going on. Your urination is going on. Downward activity is going on. That means to say your apana is doing a wonderful job. At least some locality that you can find out. But here that you cannot find out what's going on where. It's all in the form of a shell. But they are thinking, they are recollecting, they are memorizing, all those things. All the prana activities also, there is one more thing. There's a disciplined way of developing it. That's why it is called as part of discipline. Whereas your memory, your recollection, you are coming out of your unwanted fixation in mind. Suddenly you say that tomorrow onwards that I'm not fixated. Feel this moment onwards, I take it easy. I don't worry about it. It's a sudden jump. And this is what is called as the way of vairagya. I gave up. Chaotic way. So there is no organized way of happening. It is the case of antakarana. So bahya karana, there is an organized way of doing it. Prana, there is an organized way of doing it. But chitta, there is no organized way of doing it. It just happens sporadically. That's why it is called as the chaotic way. And with abhyasa is organized way and vairagya is chaotic way. A lot of times jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, they are all the things which are, the happenings are in a chaotic way. In the sense, what is chaotic? There is no systematic step-by-step growth. It's just happening. Suddenly it happens. One day you realize that you are in that state, in that happening. And when it happens, in the case of vairagya particularly, the person feels that, look, do I really deserve it? I did not deserve it because what all that I have done. So there is no claiming on that. I have done 1, 2, 3, 4. Whereas in abhyasa, there is a claiming. I've done one, I've done so many things, I've done so much of pranayama, I've done so much of nadi shuddhi. I've done so many kriyas, Brahmari, this and that, etc., etc. So many hours of meditation I've done. Therefore, I claim to have the result of it. There is a claiming in the case of abhyasa. Patanjali also puts in such a way that you do 1, 2, 3, 4, step after step in the Ashtanga Yoga. There are steps. In Vairagya, there are no steps. In the Chitta position, there is no steps. In the Prana position, yes, there are steps. In Chitta position, there are no steps. So this particular sutra, these set of sutras now we are following, are the sutras where the focus is on not on the question of the idea of prana or abhyasa, but on the question of chitta, the question of vairagya. That's what Vasishtha discusses with Rama in this particular case. Now here there is another very important aspect. Shastriji always used to say, very beautifully used to explain about that an object gives you happiness does not mean object is giving you happiness. There is an amount of unhappiness that's there within you, and that being eliminated is what is called as happiness. There is nothing like happiness which is really positively you get it by the object. Object is not contributing towards happiness, but only thing is that there is some restlessness that's there within you, unhappiness that's there within you, that is being removed. One very important statement of that happiness, unhappiness that is there within us, is either in the form of desire or in the form of attachment. These are the two things that are there. When I'm attached, I would like to have it. I would like to know about it. I would like to want it. So these are the things which are there. Already they created certain amount of restlessness within you. And then kritakrityata, the moment that is satisfied, and therefore that you feel that kind of satisfaction, the kind of trupti. It is not because that the object is giving trupti, but then this atrupti that has been there created by so many other influences, when that goes away, then you feel the trupti inside. And this is a very highly philosophical idea, Shastriji said. And that statements are also there in Yoga Vasishtha to support that. But very unconsciously, this is the same principle that material world is also using. The sense that they, first of all, they create this atrupti in you. They create that kind of desire in you, restlessness in you, and without which that your life is not complete kind of an aspect that they create within you. That's why all this advertisement business, how much money they put on the advertisement to see that you must have it. In America, when they had this car industry, they said, how can you be without a car? Every house should have a car. So much of an advertisement that they're given that every house had a car. Now they have everybody has car, fine. But then car industry has to continue, they develop. Then they have next created this idea. The advertisement used to be there. I used to see that advertisement saying that, how can a wife travel in husband's car? Because she has her own freedom. She has to have her own freedom. So therefore, at least husband should have one car, wife should have another car, without which you are not a person who is really worth living. And particularly the wife puts a condition that if I want to get married, first thing is that I must have my own car. You can have your own car. This is the condition. So every house should have 2 cars. Like that, they went on increasing so that car business goes on. And the car also developed bigger models, saying that it's a station wagon. The whole family can go together. How can you go a family in separate cars? When you go for picnic, you should go together. Not only you go for picnic together, but also you should take a boat along with you. So therefore, you create a boat also. I've seen houses where the house has got 4 bedrooms for 3 people, and it has got 6 car garage. That means cars are more than the people living in the house. And those 3 people also living in the house, they don't live together at any particular time. They have to make a special appointment to see that they all go for a vacation at a particular time. And usually, what is that particular time? And that particular time happens to be either the Thanksgiving Day or the Republic Day or things like that, which are supposed to be the holidays, government holidays. And then those days, federal holidays. And those holidays, you can see that nobody is in the house, everybody is on the street. Fortunately, the COVID has come, everybody is in the street. Streets are full of that. Why all this is created? Because that you created this desire within you. So actually, every happiness is nothing but you subserve this desire. You create that desire. You create that unhappiness. You create that restlessness, and then cater to that restlessness. That's what is the object giving us the happiness. Another beautiful example Shastriji used to give, that you're beautiful, you really enjoy the happiness is when, you have a injury and then some cut is there and all that, and then it's slowly healing now. When it is healing, that first of all, it creates a kind of a scar tissue, and that slowly peels off. And when it is peeling off, naturally what happens is the skin is trying to contract and position itself to protect your body. During that time, you develop tremendous amount of itching. You feel like scratching that. And the doctor will say, don't scratch it. Mother will say, don't scratch for the children. It's always saying, but then every child scratches it. Not only child scratches it, even mother scratches when she has that kind of a thing. Why? Because it's such a wonderful feeling. Lovely happiness that you have. That happiness is nothing not in, whereas in the normal course of scratching, you don't get that. If you have an abscess, if there is that kind of a injury that is there, then you scratch, then you get happiness. That means to say, first of all, you create negativity, then you fill that up with the help of some activity that gives us happiness. This is what Shastriji always used to say, that artificially created kind of a thing is giving us the happiness. And this was not the purpose of either prana nor the chitta. If you look at prana and chitta to be something which is directly from the divinity, then it does not have this kind of these two ideas that are there. It's because that you artificially created this desire. Therefore, that it creates happiness. Otherwise, your very nature itself is happiness. We go around, all around, and then come back to be in the state of happiness. This is what is the idea that this particular sutra, the glory of the power of pure consciousness, Chit Shakti Prabhava, pure consciousness, he gives a bilva fruit. The example of bilva fruit, the Shankara's very favorite bilva tree and bilva fruit. And bilva tree is supposed to be the place where you sit down in meditation, because bilva tree is supposed to give us oxygen, much more than any other trees who can give oxygen. Some other trees, but there are certain trees which do not give us oxygen. It can only give carbon dioxide. One such tree is supposed to be the tamarind tree. That's the reason why people say the tamarind tree on which the ghosts stay. Today that we don't believe in ghosts or anything like that, but basically that you become a ghost under the tamarind tree. But tamarind itself is not bad. Tamarind is a good. But the only thing is, under the tamarind tree, the air that you have is something which is of a negative charge, or the idea which is not oxygen content. Whereas the tree that's supposed to be bilva tree is supposed to be giving oxygen. That's one of the reasons why both the tree, bilva tree, are the one where Buddha has done the meditation practice. There are so many other things that are advantages with that. But then bilva fruit is something where you see that right from the beginning when it started to the end when it becomes like a fruit, just don't see any change in it. Any change in it. It is just with the ash color on the top, it is hard surface. Everything is exactly the same. Only thing is some little fragrance changes. But many times even that is not perceivable. Whole change takes place, but from outside it is just as one same thing. Whether it is a seed, whether the fruit pulp that is there, or the skin, the same way that it is only one content, which we call it as chitta. Chitta has got, whether it is the process called as thinking, which is supposed to be mind. Please understand that mind is not a substance, it's a process. A process called thinking, called what we call it as mind. That's why one author said, mind is a wrong subject expression. You always call it as minding. It's a noun. It's not a noun verb. It's a kriya pada. It's a verb. Similarly, analyzing is what we call it as intellect, but there is nothing like intellect at all. Analyzing activity is what is called as intellect. The same way that ego, there is nothing like ego at all. It's only the owning activity is what is called as ego. And then storing all the information is what is called as chitta. So therefore, in chit, there are all these four antakaranats, manas, buddhi, chitta, ahankara. These four are like the way that inside the bilva fruit, that everything is there and it becomes ripened, but there is nothing that is visible outside. Only when you cut the fruit, then you can separate all these things out. When you enter into the fruit, you do these things. And also it is said that when you feed the elephant with the bilva fruit, it does not even cut it open, it doesn't even make a den on it, a hole in that, but it squeezes everything that's there inside and gives out the empty shell outside. So that's why elephant is supposed to be the spiritual animal that people will say that. All these things are connected with the bilva. So therefore, this particular chapter is called as Bilva Pavakyanam. That means it is the story of the bilva fruit. Vasishtha Vacha, Vasana Haitairantraha, Indreyirahara Kriyaha, Kevalair Indreyai Sardhyam, Vartamanartha Vartmana, Asangamena Manasa, Yat Karoshi Natat Kritam. It's a very beautiful idea. Asangamena Manasa Yat Karoshi Natat Kritam. Let me come to that idea. Assuming activities with your senses, assume activities with your senses, free from mental impressions. That means senses are in the active mode, but then it is not creating any mental impressions. Knowledge derived from memory within. What do you solely with your organs of senses or actions? Moving among existing objects with the mind free from association, that is not done, is not binding. That means to say activity that happens is really not done. When it's not done, even though I'm doing it, outwardly that you see that you are doing it. You are also involved in the activities, you are practicing various things which are in the world outside. Like anybody else is doing, you're also doing all those things. But what happens with you is that only the senses which are connected with the outside are working along with that. They are associated with that. That's what he says. Antaha indriyair ahata kriyaha. So vasana rahitaihi antaha indriyair ahata kriyaha. That means to say antara indriya are not involved in that activity because there is no vasana. There is no attachment with that. Kevalair indriyai sarthyam. That means only the sensory organs are working. Vartamanartha vartita. When it happens like that, what happens? All the things that are there in the memory are supposed to be from the past or from the future. Either you desire something or you remember about whatever that happened. And both these things do not belong to Vartamana. It's in the past or it is in the future. So what do you do with only all the senses? It is in the existing object, it is in the existing reality, it is in the Vartamanaha. It's in the present. It's not going to the past or not going to the future. When these two things are eliminated, asangamena manasa, that means to say, manas does not have any attachment from the memory, does not have an attachment from the desire. None of these things are there. When that happens, yat karoshi na tat kritam. Even though you may be doing all the activities, but you are not the doer. The doer is not there. Doer is not created out of it. This is how many ways that Vedanta recognizes that, how many ways that Patanjali recognized that. Even Patanjali also said that you convert karma into kriya. That means to say kriya, difference between karma and kriya. Karma is where there is a doer is there, kartru is there, kriya is there, doer is not there. Without the doer, activity is happening. Like the way that the wind is blowing, there is a question of doer there. There is no doer behind it. Similarly, fire is burning. Where is the question of doer there? Doer not being there. So very clear. Similarly, I always give that example that when you take the food in the mouth, that's what is karma. And when your food goes through your food pipe and whole activity goes on, we call it as pachana kriya. It's not karma. Kriya because there is no I. You are not involved in that. You can't say that, look, now I am digesting my food. Who are you digesting food? Food is going on its own. So it is just left to itself to go on. So when you have this way, asangamena manasa, that means your mind is not involved in that. Yat karoshi, whatever that you did, natat krutam. In fact, if the food continues to invite your mind all the time on that, you are in trouble. When does the food invite your mind all the time on that? Is when you take so much of food or you take that kind of evil food that it always reminds you. It always calls your attention. You try one day taking extra food, then you see what will happen to you. Your mind cannot go anywhere else. You cannot do any thinking otherwise. And that's a very beautiful way that Taittiriya Upanishad Rishi says that the anna, the Brahman has become anna, annadaha. That means to say food and the hunger. These two are, it's separated into that. There is no question of ego behind it. When you put these two things together, then there is no ego. So therefore, this way, asangamena manasa, yat karoshi natat krutam. Natat krutam, there is no doer behind it. It is not that you are doing it. Very many places this particular thing has been given. Ishavasya Upanishad says that do the activity, but don't get involved in that. That's why he says, na karma lipyate narehe. Without any karma lipya, you do it. Yatha prapti kshane vastuhu prathamam tushtate tatha na prapte kakshanat urthvam itiko nanubhutavan. As the object brings satisfaction at first, at the moment of acquisition, it does not do so the moment afterwards. Who has not experienced this? What a simple truth that Yoga Vasishtha is trying to give. This is what is law of diminishing utility. Yatha prapte kshane vastuhu prathamam tushtate tatha. First time that when you go to the object outside, the satisfaction that you get is an extraordinary, wonderful satisfaction. The satisfaction that you get, the tushyate, tushtaye, that means to say santushti, the satisfaction that you get, vastuhu prathamam. Praptikshanam, at that moment when you get it, it gives so much of satisfaction. Na prapte kakshanat urthvam itiko nanubhutavan. Next morsel itself do not give you that kind of satisfaction. Next object cannot give you that kind of satisfaction what the first time that you are given the object. First time when you come across, whatever the joy that you get, second time you don't get it. However great a movie may be, you said, wow, wonderful movie. Have you seen it? Did you see it? Yeah, it's so lovely, wonderful. Then, come on, let's go today. I said, no, you go. I don't want to go. Why? Because I've already seen. The very fact he says that I've seen means that it doesn't give me that kind of satisfaction what it gives. Mullah Nasruddin used to go to the movie again and again. But he says, I will go to the same movie again and again. Why do you go? We have already seen. Said, I've already seen, therefore that I'm very clear what is the movie that I'm going to see. Every time I don't want to be under tension. What will happen next? Because the same movie, if I see that, I will have no tension. If I want to see the movie, I can see. If I want to sleep, I can sleep. I can do anything. I have my freedom. That's why I go to the same movie again and again. Only Mullah can do it, not others. Yatha prapye kshane vastu pradham tushyate tatha na prapte kshanat urthvam itiko nanubhutavan. Who does not have experience? Vancha kale yatha vastu tusthaye natyada tatha tasmat kshana sukhe saktim balo badhati ne na itaraha. As the object brings satisfaction at the time of longing for such object, This is what we need to understand very clearly. Vancha kale yatha vastuhu tustaye nanyatha tatha. As the object brings satisfaction at the time of longing for such object, it does not do so at the other time. Tasmat kshana sukhe saktim balo baddhatine taraha. Therefore, only the child has attachment to momentary pleasures, none others. If you're attached to that momentary pleasure, children, they're so caught up with the momentary pleasure at that moment, and the next moment they forget about the whole thing. They cry, they want, they do this, that, all that. But the next moment you ask them what happened, they forget. I said, but you are crying, shouting. But then he was smiling, he was happy. I remember one time I went with my brother's son, when he was a little small kid, shopping. He was hell bent to have a toffee. Brother was trying to convince him that we have tons of toffee at home. Why do you want to have it? No, I want to have it here. And that too in front of counter when he says, it's very embarrassing. Because if you don't buy that toffee, then the teller in the counter will give that toffee free to you. And you don't want that to happen. So my brother paid the money. Hardly small little money, 10 cents, 15, 20 cents or something like that. Bought that toffee. He put it in his mouth for one time. And immediately he saw behind that there was a dustbin. He just put it into the dustbin. Finished next moment. What happened? Yes, over. Huh? You just bought it and you said it. That's all. In fact, children will be crying for something and then you say, no, start from the beginning. And then we ask, okay, let's start from the beginning. Tell me why you are crying. Child says, what? Why? I don't know. I don't remember why I'm crying. Even that he doesn't even remember he was crying. It just drops. It's kshanikam. That's what vanche kala tata vastu tustate nanyatha tata tasmat kshanasukhe saktim balo baddhasine tara. That's why children, when they are pestering the mother for something, you just divert the child attention to something else. He forgets about this. Child goes something else. It's very easy. So that means to say that it's only kshanika. It's not having any attachment with that. It does not have anything with the memory and mind and intellect, etc., etc. There's no process that's going on. It's just only that in the present it is there. Vancha kshane tuya tustihi tatra vanchaihi karanam tustiratya tusti paryanta tasmat vancha parityaja. Why he said all these things? He comes to that particular conclusion now. He says that, when you desire at that moment, and then the object of the desire comes, and then you get the tustih, you get the satisfaction. So, vancha kshane tuya tustihi, for what is the karana for that? What is the cause for that? Is that your vancha. And the bigger the vancha, bigger the desire, bigger the importance that you give for that, the greater the satisfaction they get. So, vancha kshane tuya tustihi tatra vanchaiva karanam. The cause for that is your vancha. Cause that for that is your desire. Cause for that is your own attachment for that. Come what may, I must have it. And then you get it. And depending upon the proportion of how much that you seriously want it, so much that you get that object and then pleasure is there. So that means you just see now what he is now hitting at is that means say your sense of satisfaction connected with the degree of desire that you have, desire, hankering for that, desire of restlessness that you created. You created that restlessness for that object, then you have it. If you have not created that restlessness for the object, then where is the question of looking for satisfaction from the object? It does not give. It does not. So object appears to be giving you satisfaction. Also, it is not object that's giving us the satisfaction, but it is this negativity that's created in the form of vancha, the desire, in the form of vasana. That's what is creating the satisfaction. So therefore, the whole approach is one for this particular vancha. Tushtistva, tushti paryanta, tasmat vancha parityaja. What happens is that once you are in the tushti, satisfaction, then tushti paryantaha. That means to say, satisfaction bound to be dissatisfied. And over a period of time, the satisfaction is bound to become dissatisfaction. You want to, it transfers itself into dissatisfaction. The same object will not give you the kind of, that itself shows that diminishing utility. Therefore, what you need to do, should we come to desire and then slowly the desire drops off? Not having desire itself. In which case that you are constantly in the state of satisfaction. Because the desire is the one which creates a dissatisfaction within. A small little desire will immediately create a dissatisfaction, maybe very trivial. And the desire also is known as in the form of expectation. The moment that you create an expectation, then you are in the negative. And in the beginning that it was no expectation, it was not desire. There was no desire attached to that. Like for example, somebody has dropped his, say, pen or something like that on the, and then you immediately picked it up and give it to him. At that time, there's pure divinity within you, connectedness within you, because with that you picked it up and give it to him. And you can see on his face that he's satisfied. So satisfied. When you look at that satisfaction, you feel also that, yes, you did a nice job. But many times that person may be busy with some phone or something like that. And then he doesn't even, you give it to him, he picks it up and then he continues to talk. Suddenly what happens to you? You say that this fellow didn't even say thanks to me. Harry, you didn't expect the thanks in the beginning. You just did it spontaneously. But later on, you convert it into expectation. That expectation is what is called as desire. So, tushtis pratushti paryanta. Atushtihi, that means to say the satisfaction becomes non-satisfaction. Tasmat vancha parityada. Give up all these vancha. Expectations you give up. It's a very beautiful statement that Yoga Vasisthha gives us. Give up all the expectations. When you have no expectations, particularly we have a lot of expectations from the God. We expect God should do this, God should do that. As if He's a wonderful handyman for you. Don't have any expectations. Then what happens? When you don't have expectations, whatever that you get is like you want to celebrate. It's like it's like an extraordinary moment. It's a gift from you are given. Is it not life? Every moment of life is a gift for you. Is it not something which is coming to you unasked? Ashaya tu nirashatvam, abhavam yatu bhavanam, amanastvam mano yatu, tava sangena jivitaha. Living without attachment, to live, to you, living without attachment, let desire become desirelessness, let imagination become reduced to non-existence, and let the mind be reduced to a state of free from the mind. Asha ayatu nirashatvam. Asha we know very well. You want to desire. And then living without this attachment. Abhavam yatu bhavanam. There is absolutely no feeling of abhava. Come out of that abhava into bhavanam. You see, this is, abhava means I don't have it, I expect. Some people are there who constantly want to expect and expect. Miserly people. They just want everybody has to give them. They don't give it to anybody. When I was working as an engineer, I had a colleague of mine. We have a good set of doctor friends and families and all that, involved in various surgeries and all that, and there was a need for blood. Those days we didn't have all the blood banks and all that. So we always used to create like a list of people who their blood we have grouped and all that, kept ready, so that whenever the phone call comes that we need blood, transport to people and then make them give their blood and all that. So it was going on. But then there was one colleague of mine who was sitting just with me in the same chamber. Somebody raised that question saying that, hey, you have the list of everybody's, but then you don't have this man's name in the list. I looked into the list. Yes, he's not there. Hey, come on, tell me what's your group of blood. He said, I have not even made a group test of blood test. What? You don't even know the group of your blood? Yeah. But why don't you go and today they will group it and also that you can give the blood. No, no, I don't want to give blood. Therefore, I did not group it. Or at least go and then make it a group. So when I give it blood for grouping, I have to give one smear of blood. Yeah, that much if I give the blood, then what will happen to me? That also. I wish that somebody can give me blood. He wants everybody to. I said, you don't give blood, all right, but then don't wish that somebody should give you blood. That state should not come to you. But poor fellow died with that kind of situation only. He needed blood transfusion. But miserly. See, this is what some people are so miserly, and that's what is called as abhava. Abhava is miserliness. Constantly feeling that I don't have this, I don't have that. It's negativity for everything. I don't have this, I don't have that. Mullah Nasruddin has said that my crops are not all right this year, failed. And he was crying. Mullah's wife said, when I went to ask Mullah what happened, is he went into the last. Mullah's wife said there's nothing like that, he got enough. Only thing is he always tries to cry. He said, what is it you are getting? I was expecting 10,000 rupees profit, but I only got 5,000 rupees profit. Even that also abhava he is looking at. So you always see abhava. So the next level from abhava, not being abhava, that means to say, I feel all right, I'm okay. That's what is abhava to bhava. But then there is next level, what is called as beautiful thing is that I give out. I give. I have so much more than what I deserve, what I can have it. So much is I'm given. This giving, whether it is the knowledge, whether it is the object, whether it is comfort to somebody, you are ready to give. This out of such a feeling that by giving that you feel the satisfaction. By giving that you feel that you are taking care of the divinity. This is what is the next step called as abhava to bhava, bhava to ahobhava. Ahobhava is that, oh God, you are so kind to me. I don't know what is that I have done so that I deserved whatever that you gave it. When you are at that level where you are in the ahobhava, where is the question of abhava? When the abhava is not there, your mind becomes peaceful. That's what he says. Ashayatu nirashatvam. Give up asha. Come to the state of nirasha. But then abhavant yatu bhavanam. Then you come to that abhava to bhava. Amanastam mano yatu. When there is question of asha, when there is question of abhava, then the mind is continuously active. Mind activity is going on. So therefore, amanastum mano yatu. Manas becomes amana when you get into that. Tavat sangena, tava sangena, tava asangena jivitaha. That means to say, you are living in this world, but at the same time, you are not attached with this world. And you live in this world every moment like a celebration, like a wonderful moment that has come in front of you. This way, when we do it, that's what the right way of attitude of life. All these things happen in the case of chitta. In the case of internal activity, that's these things. The change that you need to do is to change with them. Like for example, from coming to asha to nirashatvam, abhava to bhava, or going from manas to amanastvam, all these things happen inside. That's why I said it is like the way vairagya. Vairagya is something which is like a celebration. It's not leaving everything and becoming depressed. That's not the idea. So these are the ideas that are given in this particular chapter. We'll continue the discussion next time when we meet. Thank you so much. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.